Hey everybody, it's Crystal here from Fat Product Review. So excited to be here again today. If you love our videos and you like our content and you want to see more of it, please hit the subscribe button. And we always love comments and shares. And I'm so excited and totally honored today to be here interviewing Dr. Joy Arlene Renee Cox. And this is her book, Fat Girls in Black Bodies. And it's so beautiful and so wonderfully written. And there's just sentences in here I just pulled out and was like saving. I wish I could write a sentence like that. Just so beautiful. And it's such a great topic. So welcome, Dr. Cox.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So I want to start out by talking about Black Girl Magic a little bit. And because my audience is probably largely Caucasian, would you tell us what Black Girl Magic means to you? And then I'm going to share with you how I met you. And I think it's a little Black Girl Magic at work there too.
Yeah, I think to me, Black Girl Magic is like existing unapologetically in your own skin, and then kind of out of that, like your personality just oozes. I think that people being able to be authentic kind of is what that magic is about, right? So you doing you, or you doing what you do the best way that you can, kind of adds that extra sparkle of what Black Girl Magic is. So that's what Black Girl Magic is to me, right? You don't have to be somebody, you don't have to do something that's super extraordinary. You have to be yourself. You have to be authentic, and you live in life in that space, and taking up that space is magical.
Take up all the space. Yeah, I got
Yeah.
to interview Saucy about her. She's a wonderful model and amazing human and
Yeah.
just
Saucy
lovely
is
friend.
awesome.
Yeah, she's badass. And she had this whole thing where in the beginning of her modeling career, she was, trying to be like all the others, which tend to be in the fat modeling world, tend to be white women with hourglass figures. And then she was like, I'm just going to make my own lane. I'm just going to do my own thing and not try to be like them or try to emulate them. I'm just going to do Saucy. And I was like, yes,
Yeah.
that's her Black girl magic, right? She's being her. She's being authentic to who she is.
Right. Exactly.
And she's wonderful. And she's created that movement, fat and free, hashtag fat and free.
Yeah.
And yeah, when we would do our fashion shows and stuff, and when Saucy was modeling, we would always use her hashtag. And then one of our fashion shows was called Unapologetically Fat, because we are unapologetically fat. And in the beginning, when I first had I used to own a lingerie store for curvy women, and I had my first fashion show. It was very white, and I, representation matters, right? I don't just say that, I really mean it. And of course, I mean that because I had a laundry store for fat women. However, I did not know how to go and, with intention, find models who are Black or brown without seeming weird or like I was going to tokenize them in some way. But I really wanted fat Black girls and fat brown girls. And I didn't know how to do it. And I was like, oh, how do I do that? And now I know, but that was like 8 years ago. But I got a lot of
Mhm.
guidance from Tigress and others. But yeah, like if you are a white person like me and I want to have an event and I want to make it clear that this event is for everybody, is there a good way to do that without sounding like an asshole?
Yeah, I think part of what I just talked about is about being authentic. It's always good to also start early, right? So what type of relationships are you already building with individuals in your community to kind of bridge that gap to learn more about them? What does inclusivity look like to you? Is it just something that you want for an event? Is it just something that you want for this kind of like blip in time, or are you really interested in building these long-term types of relationships? And if you were to ask me, I think that building long-term relationships actually matter more, right? That you very easily will step outside of this idea of Black people being like props in your events or the things that you throw when you build authentic relationships. And so connecting with people outside of like just your events and things like that is a great way to start, right? Like we're human, we're people, right? And I would imagine that if I sat down and I talk with you, we have a lot of things that are in common, right? So why can't we work on that? And then whenever you're doing these other things, you can always reach back to me and say, hey, I'm putting on this event. Do you think you might be interested? But what I found is that when individuals lead with this idea of like being inclusive and and following these steps, right, that make them successful in that, that's where all the missteps happen. And a big part of that is because relationship hasn't been built first.
Yeah, totally. And I used to be afraid to talk about race, like 10 years ago, and like a lot of white people. But I'm working hard to not be afraid to talk about it because it's so important. And I think a lot of white people think, oh, there's so much progress made since the civil rights movement. And I'm like, no, there's a decade of some great, great accomplishments and great opportunities. But then I would say the last 50 years, there really hasn't been so much, right? So civil rights movement was wonderful, but it's not that great right now, and it's definitely hasn't been that great the last 40 years. So we have a lot of work to do. But I think white people got confused that, oh, we did all that already, and it's like, no, sadly we didn't keep it up, right? So that's what made me nervous, I guess, to talk about race. But yeah, I'm learning to talk about everything. Like I'm going to get ready to do a video about my female issues, my uterus issues, trying to murder me. I'm trying to normalize more conversations like about menopause and perimenopause and mental health and racism. So it's up to me to do that shit and not worry about how hard it is. And if I screw up, then people tell me I screw up, and then I try to do better. Um, I forgot to mention about the Black Girl Magic and how I got to meet you. Is I was trying to create this new channel during the pandemic because I couldn't work. And I used to be very involved in the fat acceptance and fat liberation movement. Then I sold my store and I kind of had some health issues, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I wanted to get back into it. So I started doing these interviews, and I was just trying to think of all the people I know. But I was like, I developed all these wonderful relationships with these people, right? All different fat varieties of people and different people of color and different abilities and trans friends. And anyway, so I thought, I'm going to ask them if they'll do an interview with me. And then so I talked to Steph Penn. She owns a Black-owned graphic company called Tea and Honey.
Yeah.
And I said, Steph, I want to interview you. And she's like, yeah, you should also interview my cousin, Jamilah, who has a business called Call Number Box. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
and,
correct.
Her Call Number Box of business is curated subscription boxes with books centered around books and stuff. And then she includes all this really cool stuff. Like when I got your book,
Nice.
I got that. And then this one cracked me up because I'm 52, so I know what these are. And sorry, I spilled water on it or tea. But this is like when I was in junior high, we'd have to go to the card catalog and look for the Dewey Decimal number.
Right.
It even has the little hole like they would have if it was in the box. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
So she's a Black-owned business. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if I can get Dr. Cox to talk to me too. So through the Black Girl Magic and the Fat Black Girl Network, they introduced me to you. So I'm so excited to be a recipient of some really cool Black Girl Magic.
Awesome. And I've known about you for years. When I was first starting out, kind of getting involved in fat acceptance, I heard about Curvy Girl lingerie.
Cool.
So I started following you years ago, just kind of watching things evolve. Because to me, it was a very new space. It was, a lot that I didn't know. I didn't know that Curvy Girl lingerie was like a thing and that it existed and just a space for resources. So we've kind of been connected for a while, even though we just formally, have met.
And you're not in the Bay Area, right?
I'm not. I'm actually on the East Coast.
That's what I thought. So when I got to your chapter 7, which is an amazing chapter, together we can change the world, an ode to fat Black girl magic, right? And so as I'm reading this, I was like, she mentioned my friend Irene and Juicy and Tigress and Saucy and Efficina and Sonia Renee. Wow, Sonia, I consider her a friend, that's amazing. And how does Dr. Cox know all these people?
Yeah, so some I don't formally know, but their work has inspired the work that I do. But I got involved with Tigress years ago when I first started researching. Yeah, when I first started researching fat acceptance, and I think through her, also got connected to Juicy. Just recently was able to connect with Emphasia. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing their name. And so, there's like this network, right? And I kind of talk about this in the book about this community, how, we're networking and maybe there are a lot of informal channels around that, but being able to find the people who live like you, who look like you, it's like you find one. In some ways you kind of find them all, because we all are kind of interconnected.
Right. Yeah. I always thought I was just so fortunate because I live in the Bay Area and there are so many fat activists here. And it's like really, really rich with people of so much diversity. Right. And now
Yeah.
your book, there's some connection with you in Berkeley, right? The book is something. I read something about the book being published by a publisher in Berkeley, or am I wrong?
So the publisher of the book is North Atlantic Books.
Okay.
And yeah, they're located in Berkeley, California.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
I must have saw that. I am going to open the book to try to find this quote that you wrote about Fannie Lou Hamer that is just like, oh, so beautiful. I just was like teary-eyed when I read that. And I'm going to start. I have a hard time seeing with my glasses on, which sounds weird. But okay, here it is. So hopefully people here know who Fannie Lou Hamer is. If you don't, you should, first of all. But you said that Hamer lived in a fat, disabled body. Her focus was on that many fat activists and supporters of fat acceptance speak on today: equal rights, this is the part I love, equal rights, equitable partnerships, and food that fed the body and the soul without weight loss bullshit. You said BS.
Mm-hmm.
I love that sentence. I love her. And what should people know about her if they don't already know about her?
I mean, so Fannie Lou Hamer, she's the essence of fat girl magic, black fat girl magic. She was a grassroots organizer. She was very much involved in the civil rights movement. Most people probably know her from the National Democratic Convention. She is the Black woman who spoke there, where Lyndon B. Johnson had her cameras turned off on purpose, so that they didn't hear her speech. And then you kind of see probably what she is most quoted for when the cameras come back on and like her speech is finishing up. But, outside of that, she did a lot of work around food justice. She created collectives, collaborations on making sure that people were fed, that food was being provided to communities. And she did a lot of that work, like I kind of mentioned, in a disabled body. I believe she had 2 children. She had a husband. And, also she was a victim of racism and fat phobia as it relates to medicalization, where she was mistreated, and I think they actually sterilized her. So she has a very rich history, and really led the way for a lot of grassroots organizers as it relates to Black women being in the forefront of movements, in the forefront of doing work and making sure that they are taking care of the collective. And so Fannie Lou Hamer is a bright, shining star as it relates to not just food justice, but civil rights and a representation for fat Black women across the globe.
Yeah. Yeah, she's quite an inspiration for sure. So I know you're a large part of your book is about creating communities, creating communities of your own, right? Like I love to create community, but like when I'm in community, I tend to be around people of size, but also people of all colors. But I also recognize how important it is if you're a Black woman, Black fat woman. I can only imagine how powerful it would be to be around a group of other fat Black women, because I know for me, it's very powerful to be around other fat women in general. So tell me, why is community so important to you? I know why it's important to me, but I wonder, why is it so important to you? And how do you how can we all create more of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think community is like the building blocks to who we are as individuals, right? Community helps to make up our personality. It also helps to guide us, to steer us, to uphold us, to support us when we need it. So not only do we get from community, but I think it also gives us the opportunity to give back, right? And so everything that I've learned, the things that I've accomplished, I take it back to my community and I pour it back to them. The hope is that those things that I pour back into them then kind of illuminate maybe spaces that they haven't seen before. And it causes us to all grow together, right? And so
Mm,
community to me is everything, right? Community can house, your family members, community can house friends, community can house resources, community can house romance. All of these things. And so, it's a life-giving source as long as you feed it. And
mhm.
and I think that that's the beauty of having community, is that you not only get from community, but you also can give back, and then the community flourishes as a result.
So, as a white person and people who are listening to this, if they're also white, how can we support Black people? How can we support people of color better? I mean, I know that's a huge question, but like, are there ideas that you can think of, like when we are in community, how we can support our Black sisters and our just stop being so focused on us? Like, I know we get very focused on us, but how can we do that better?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. It goes back to what I mentioned earlier. I think it starts with relationship. I think it starts with us talking to one another, interacting with each other, and then finding out, and to what capacity you can be in community with other people, right? And so there may be some people who need resources. Can you position yourself to give the resources, and that be it, right? There may be other people who need support. There may be other people who enjoy having you around and very much involved, right? But a lot of that is dictated in relationship. A lot of that is dictated in being able to say, you're not going to center yourself in what you think you want or what you think is the right answers, right? Who's the smartest person in the room about what's best for other people? And so I think some of this takes a little bit of humbleness and being able to sit with your own discomfort as it relates to the interactions that you have with people who are different from you, who live by a different culture than you, different standards than you. And being able to learn and be educated, and then kind of have those conversations, and then involve yourself, find your lane, and work in that, right? Because a lot of times when you hear people talk about individuals getting involved, that there may be some things that don't work for you personally, right? So I mentioned resources, right? There's a possibility that you don't have resources to give, right? But what can you do? And what can you do that you are in relationship with other people in the community that they can verify, right, or vindicate in some ways? And so I think a lot of this is about relationship, having conversations with one another, and kind of decentering ourselves from being the standard. And I say ourselves because there's spaces that I have to decenter myself in some ways, right? Like, I'm an able-bodied person, so I wouldn't dare go into a space where there are disabled people and tell them what they need, or what they should be doing, how they should be living their life. I wouldn't think of that in a million years. But I would go in humble. I would go in being able to listen, to take in education, and then to have conversations with them about how they would like to see me involved, and then do my best to fill those spaces. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Great advice. Yeah. I always try to tell myself, take a breath, take a beat, maybe see if I can signal boost something. Maybe I can volunteer some help, but stop trying to be a part of the headline, right? Stop trying to be the organizer or whatever. Just like Crystal, take a beat, find out how you can be helpful and a resource, and then just sit down and shut up for a little bit. It's hard for me because, when I was going to school, I was taught, well, like white men, that everything I have to say is so important. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and we joke about how white men feel that way, but also white women, we were raised that way too, going to school, raise your hand, whatever your question you have is important. And we have to just sometimes
Yeah.
Just be quiet. So tell me, how did you start writing this book? Did it just come to you? Did you sit down one day and it just like, blah, it just came out? Or was it like, did it come together over time? Like, how did it appear to you?
Yeah, so I was featured in a piece by the Huffington Post. It was entitled "Everything You Know About Obesity Is Wrong," and in tandem with that, I was also working on my dissertation at Rutgers University, where I got my degree, my PhD in communication, and I was studying fat acceptance, studying the fat liberation movement. And so I was already doing some writing on that, already collecting some data. I also have a podcast. So Fresh Out the Cocoon podcast was a podcast that was a platform for fat Black women and femmes. So I was capturing stories there. And then I was contacted by North Atlantic Books, and they had sent me a message to see if I was interested in writing a book. And so kind of taking all of those things together, some stuff from the dissertation, some stuff from the podcast, and then my own personal story, I was able to kind of craft this idea, right? The importance of community, what mattered to me, what I've seen in the interviews, what I had seen from my dissertation data, right? Just on fat liberation as a whole, and having talked to Black individuals who are part of the movement. And that's kind of what helped to craft like the idea of the book. And really focusing on fat Black girls, fat Black women, fat Black femmes, and kind of uplifting our voices in ways that, they are being drowned out as it relates to fat acceptance.
Love it. So you didn't really find it difficult to write. You were able to these chapters it reads so, I just like, oh, I love it. I love it. I can't stop. But you didn't find it difficult to put it all together into like a cohesive book?
No, it was hard.
Okay.
It was hard.
I found it hard too.
Yeah. There were some pieces. I mean, there's some of it that I pull in like my own personal stories and, having been in academia for so long, you get used to writing a certain way. And so I had to kind of break away from that a little bit to kind of tell a story, tell my own story in my own words, but then also kind of thread research through it. And so there were some points where I was just like, this doesn't fit, that doesn't fit, where I'm going to put this, the chapters. And that's kind of how the excerpts actually came out. So in the book, you'll see that there are 3 separate sets of excerpts in addition to the chapters that are being written, because I had so much to say and I didn't know where to put it. And I didn't know where to stick it, or, it didn't fit nicely in the chapters. And I was like, can we just do these little additions?
I love them. I love the way it's organized. So like for people who, first of all, I don't have a college degree, and it's very smart, but it's totally readable. And it's very like common language, like just like speaking language. So it's like we're just when I'm reading it, I feel like I'm just having a conversation with you, I was like, oh, but with some really beautifully crafted sentences in there where I'm just like, oh, wow, I wish I wrote that sentence. It's really beautifully written. I love it. I think I'm so excited for this book and for all the things I think are going to come from this. Because I was telling for our listeners, I was telling Dr. Cox, I think this is like a beautiful brand. The artwork is so iconic, and I can just imagine it everywhere. And who's the artist?
So I do have her name.
It's not in here too.
I would hope that they credited her on the
picture. They did in the very front, yeah.
Okay, in the front. It's awesome.
It starts with an N, I'm remembering. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes, so don't worry about it. But
her name's Jasmine. That's what it is, Jasmine.
Look what I got when I got my book.
Oh, yay! Okay, so you got a book plate. Awesome.
How the heck is this like? Oh, this sounds like a nightmare. So much signing your name. I'll be like, ah.
Yeah, I was super excited to only have 6 letters in my name.
My first name is 8 letters. My last name is 6 letters.
Oh, wow.
I know. So, how, like, when did you come out as fat? Like, when did you decide, like, I'm fat, I'm going to start calling it that? I'm going to call myself a fat person.
I want to say maybe between 2013-ish, 2014. I mean, like, my story to coming into fat acceptance has been interesting. In 2012, I had started my master's program at the University of Missouri, Columbia, in Columbia, Missouri. Yay, Mizzou.
Yeah.
And I initially went into that program studying interpersonal relationships. I was interested in romantic relationships with military members.
Mm.
And I was at home during the summer. I think it was the summer or towards the end of spring. And I was watching the news on the TV, and it came on that the AMA, I believe, had made obesity a disease. Or they had marked it, they either named it a disease, or they were attempting to name it a disease or a disability, one of those. And I just remember being very irate about it. I was very upset. I called my older sister, who was smaller than me, and I was ranting about, just because I'm bigger doesn't mean that I can't do anything, can't do certain things, and I shouldn't be classified this way. And she didn't really get it. And I remember hanging up the phone. The next meeting I had with my advisor, I walked into the school and I said, I'm not studying interpersonal communication anymore. I want to study about fat acceptance. I want to study about the stigma around weight. And that's what I'm going to write my master's thesis on. And I was super fired up about it. And that was kind of the turning point for me. I had always lived in a larger body. I've been fat my whole life. And so for me, it mattered. I had already lived with this sense of confidence in who I was and kind of understanding the importance of taking up space, but I didn't have the language for it.
Sure.
And then 2013 hit. I think it was, they wanted to make it a disability, I think. And I was like, this is ridiculous. What can I do? What can I say? How can I say these things? And I set out to interview people and get feedback from people to kind of push back against this. And then, to my surprise, I find out that this work has actually been done and has been, and is ongoing, has been ongoing for, the last 40 years. And I'm like, wow, okay. So that was kind of the starting point for me officially being into fat acceptance and liberation.
Love it. Yeah, it's important. It took me a while to find the language too, but I knew I've been fat. I've been fat since the third grade, and I know this because a doctor told me I'm fat. I was 111 at the age of 11, and I guess that was a huge deal because he made it a huge, big deal. And my mom does not even remember that. I'm like, Mom, how could you forget that day?
Right. But isn't it always? I think it's always, telling how there are things that stick out to us that seem to my dad was the person who kind of let me know that my body was different. He passed in 2018, but I'm sure if I would have said, remember when I was 4 and you lifted me up and you told me you couldn't keep lifting me up, he'd be like, what? When did this happen? But that was something that always stuck in my mind.
I read that in your book. Recently, I had to have a pelvic ultrasound. It was a week ago, Saturday. And I was curious about the whole process, like I always am. And so I'm asking the lady all these questions and stuff. And she was like, oh, sometimes ovaries are hard to find for people your age. I'm 52 and a half. And because they get really small and they shrink. And I was like, yes, ovaries shrink. And then I said, so also because I have a lot of belly fat, is it harder to see the ovaries because of my belly fat? She said, oh, don't call it that. And I'm like, what else would I call it? It's obviously fat. So no, don't call it that. I'm like, okay. So I just feel like fat's just a neutral descriptor, just like I have brown hair, So right. Oh no, don't call it that. But I didn't push it with her because she's just doing her job, and I'm not going to give her the whole fat liberation discussion. But I know you've had experiences like that too, where you're not fat, you're beautiful.
Right. That seems to be the, but it's because of all the connotations, right, of fat and what society has kind of made that term out to be. And you have to, like you say, you got to correct it and say, no, it's just a descriptor. It's just the way that I describe myself. I think it also, for me, it also identifies the elephant in the room, so to speak, right? This is what I'm going to be talking about. This is who I am. You don't have to tiptoe around this. You don't have to find euphemisms for it. It is what it is. Can we please get on with things, right? So if I identify myself as fat first, now we can actually get past everything else and really just focus on ourselves, talk about one another.
It took me about 8 days, until today, this morning, when I was driving to my gynecologist appointment. And maybe she wanted me to say fluff. oh, don't call it fat, call it fluff, because she didn't have another term for me to use. But I was like, adipose tissue. I'm like,
Yeah, right.
that's the official term, right? I was like, okay, but yeah, anyway, it wasn't the time or place for me to give her the full education. But I was like, no, 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 it's just neutral descriptor. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it happens all the time, right? And I know there's this, ridiculous trope that um, it's being fat and black is like no big deal because the black community totally accepts fat bodies, and it's just crystal, no, it's no big deal. It's not true at all, right? Like that's a total trope,
Right.
total not true. It took me a while to
Right.
learn that.
I mean, I think the Black community has their own set of beauty standards. What I can tell you is that being fat is not one. It's not one of those standards. I think in some ways, body diversity is a thing in the Black community or in Black collectives, but there still is a beauty standard that says women are supposed to have small waists and big butts and wide hips, but no bellies and big big boobs and all of these things. They're all unrealistic. People expect you to be able to carry fat on your body, but not to the point to where it spills over on any other body part. Also unrealistic. And and if you're fat and you carry a decent amount of fat on your body, if you don't have that hourglass shape, if you don't have that quote unquote pear shape, right? You are considered not to be attractive in the Black community. And so, the idea that the Black collective is more accepting is just not factual.
Yeah, I didn't learn that until about 5 or 6 years ago. I was really, I guess I was kind of disappointed, because like, damn, but of course I believe my Black friends when they tell me, no, Crystal, it's the same kind of, connotation that comes when you have, like you said, like my excessive belly fat touches my thighs. Like that's really frowned upon in pretty much all communities, apparently. And I was disappointed to hear that in a way, because I think, oh, but where do we get these ideas that it's more acceptable in the Black community? I don't know, where does this come from? Media?
Yeah, I think media is a big thing. I mean, I think if you look at, the stereotypes about Black women, who gets revered in Black communities, right? And so, big mama, so to speak, are that stereotype is revered in media as it relates to Black collectives. The mommy type figure, right? Then you have the mammy. Then you have people also known as like the Jezebels who are hypersexual. But I think a lot of that taken together is where people get these ideas that to be fat and Black, it's kind of celebrated when, yeah, like I said, like historically, that's just not. I mean, now in other countries, right, there are spaces, places, continents, like, right, so there's spaces in Africa where I mean, it's a different type of I don't know if you want to call it abuse, but people are kind of force fed to be larger. But then there are also larger bodies are revered in those other countries as a sign of wealth and prosperity and all of these other things. But I think that a lot of the stereotypes about that do come from this sense of what the media is writing about Black collectives. And then I also think, as it relates to representation, where so there has been research that has been done that says that Black girls have a higher self-esteem than white girls after they showed them like magazines, right? So they show white girls magazines, and they obviously in magazines there's white models, right? And so there's a very clear representation of white people being able to see their ideal body types, right, in magazines. And then they take research and they look at it and they say, oh, their self-esteem dropped. Well, we show Black girls the same magazines and like their self-esteem didn't drop. Well, probably because Black girls don't see themselves in those white models, right? But if you were to take the same type of magazines and you take a Black girl and tell her to look at Beyonce's body, right? Or tell her to look at somebody whose body is revered in the Black collective, and then test her self-esteem, you probably would see things change. And so there's a lot of, discrepancy as it relates to research too. And we're like putting out these messages about, how Black people feel about their bodies without really doing our due diligence as it relates to research and also culture.
Yeah, we need to end that trope. It's really unfair and unrealistic. And yeah, I'm sorry that I ever believed in it, but I'm also sorry it's not true. Because yeah, it would be lovely if it was true.
Yeah, because we're awesome, obviously. Obviously.
I agree. So I thank you for this interview. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited because I'm excited that you agreed to read the first paragraph of your last chapter, because I love the way you end your book and I love the way you titled it. And I think this really it encapsulates a lot about what your book is about, right? Your love for your community. And I love that too. And I want to just mention, if people want to buy Dr. Cox's book, you just go to DrJoyCox, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Joy Cox. Okay. And you can buy the books there. She has links to independent book owners where you can buy it from those links. And then maybe one day we'll find some merchandise on your website as well, right?
Yeah, that's the hope, because I have bags and
Yes.
I hear stickers are coming and different things like that. So the hope is that, we will have something up and running where individuals can purchase. I think I actually have I could show maybe just really quick.
Oh yeah, it's so cute.
So this is okay. So this is the bag, right?
Oh, I love it.
And it's really it's large, and it has a pocket and everything in it where you can carry your phone. But yeah, so stay tuned, Dr. Joy.
Awesome. More to come.
Yeah, awesome. And so I'm going to go ahead and read the paragraph. The conclusion. So the last chapter of the book is entitled "A Love Letter to Fat Girls in Black Bodies." And it reads, "Dear sisters, my beautiful and wonderfully made sisters, I do hope that this book has spoken to some part of you. I hope that you see yourself in the pages of labored love. To know you is to love you. You weather storms that make others wonder how you made it out alive. The rhythm of your walk is infused with magic even when you're standing or sitting still. I want you to know that things get better. I want you to know that if you're reading this book, you have survived 100% of your worst days. Healing happens, but it doesn't happen overnight. Give it time, sis. Watch the sun come out again for you. Watch love show up unexpectedly and sweep you off your feet."
So beautiful. I love it. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cox. I really appreciate your time today. All the best with your book and all of your new projects coming up around the book. I'm just so excited to see lots more of you all around.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. This has been great. And I always love talking about community. And, I wish you nothing but the best as we kind of move forward in this work together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Have a good one. Thanks
all right,
again.
you too. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.